Sahitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Bhakti Sri Radha Krishna Padam Sadhana Lalita Sri Vishakhan Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Sivasadi Gaur Bhakta Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Sivasadi Gaur Bhakta Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhakta Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, dear devotees, Dandavat Pranams to all. We welcome all of you for the today's morning program Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya. And today we will be playing the recorded lecture of His Holiness Bhakti Rasamrita Swami Maharaj, and the topic is pollution within and without. This is the recorded lecture. Hare Krishna. Let me play now.
Good evening. Very happy to be here for this urban yoga program. I'm not a regular visitor to Melbourne, so it's also nice for me to be exposed to the different segments of the population of Melbourne and the varied interests that the people of Melbourne have. And I'm happy also to see that there is a rising interest in spirituality, yoga, and so on, even whilst living in urban spaces. So the title Urban Yoga, I think, is quite appropriate. The topic I was asked to speak on is pollution within and without. As we all know, this is something that is occupying everybody's mind world over. The problem has assumed enormous proportions, and it threatens the very future of our lives, of our planet. And we have a major problem on our hands. But I would beg to state today that the environmental crisis, as grave as it may be, is not really the main problem. That is simply a symptom of the problem. The actual cause is something deeper, something underlying, and that is the environmental crisis within. The environmental crisis without is caused by the environmental crisis within. It is pollution within that causes pollution without. One is the cause of the other. When we speak of the word pollution, what do we mean? In a very general sense, the word pollution indicates the introduction of some contaminant, of some substance into an environment that causes some harm. This substance that has been introduced into any environment, whether it's the atmosphere, the water, the land, or into our own bodies, for example, or into our minds, anything that causes an imbalance, anything that causes an aberration, it causes a disruption in the balance, that is a pollution, that is a pollutant, that is pollution. Something that effectively creates some harm, causes some instability, creates an unnatural situation, disturbs something from a position of equilibrium. That's pollution. That's really a broad understanding of the term. As far as the gross, external pollution is concerned, we are all very familiar with it. We know about atmospheric pollution, we know about water pollution, we know about pollution of the earth, and so many different types of pollution. What is not widely recognized and sufficiently appreciated is the gravity of the problem of internal pollution that underlies all problems in this world. It would not be an exaggeration to say that every single problem that we can think of in this world is the result of this one problem, the pollution within. If we take care of this one problem, all other problems will be taken care of. It might sound too hyperbolic, too much of an exaggeration, but it's a fact. Because ultimately, whatever situation we find ourselves in the modern times, or in any time in the history of the world, is a result of all that we have done, we as a race. As humanity, whatever we have done, we pay the price for it. As you sow, so shall you reap. So humanity has been exclusively and solely responsible for the crises, the numerous and varied crises that confront us today. So I'm not going to speak much about external pollution and its forms, because I think we're all very well aware of it. And especially in Australia and many other countries of the world today, there is a very high level of awareness about these things. Rather, I'd like to focus my attention today on the subject of this internal pollution. Very often, when our devotees travel, we are asked the question by people at airports and at different fora where we speak, what are you people doing about environmental pollution, about the environmental crisis? Are you people being relevant to the world That's a question that we are sometimes asked, and justifiably so, understandably. At one level, we are trying to do our bit. Our founder, Srila Prabhupada, did speak about organizing self-sufficient eco-villages, communities of people who would be living in harmony with nature, devoid of the trappings of the modern urban consumerist culture. Urban culture means the consumerist culture. Consumerist culture means consume, consume, consume. And what do you consume? You consume the products of an industrial civilization. This industrial civilization is actually responsible for the environmental crisis today. That is the unfortunate reality. But behind this the environmental or the industrial culture or the consumerist culture is the fact that there is a certain dissatisfaction that drives humanity to go ahead and do things for improvement. It's not wrong to improve our lot. But the question is, what is the driving force behind this desire for improvement? Modern technology is driven by something. It's driven by a desire to want to make this world a better place. But the process is misplaced. Behind the whole development of technology, the whole industrial revolution a couple of centuries ago, leading up to the modern times, is based upon a very fundamental spirit of wanting to enjoy this world. And that is a real problem. When we speak of the internal pollution, we are speaking about introduction of something within that is alien to us, inasmuch as the introduction of some chemicals or pollutants into the air basically involves introducing something that is alien to the air. So similarly, we have introduced something that is alien to our consciousness within our minds. And that something is responsible for stimulating us to do so many other things that cause a disturbance. Pollution internally means pollution of our consciousness. What is consciousness? Consciousness is the sense of I-ness. Consciousness is awareness. We are all aware of our existence. I think it was Descartes who said, I think, therefore I am. So my existence and my awareness of that existence is what makes me conscious. I am conscious that I exist. I am conscious of my desires and my wants and my needs. And so are each one of us in this world. Now, the main point is that this consciousness is spiritual. The original nature of our consciousness is spiritual. We are essentially spiritual beings. We are essentially divine in nature. That doesn't mean that we are God. It means that our original constitutional nature is that we are godly, we are divine, we are spiritual, and in a sense, we have nothing to do with all the petty ambitions and the worldly desires that plague the minds of humanity. That's something quite alien to us as spiritual beings, as souls. Pollution, as I mentioned, involves introducing some foreign element that causes a disturbance and changes the sense of balance. And what would one do to rectify the pollution? one would remove that polluting element and return that environment or that system to its original position. So to depollute something means to come back to the original position. So if we want to rectify the external pollution, we have to rectify the internal pollution. If we want to rectify the internal pollution, then we have to come back to our original positions. And our original position is that we are spiritual beings. So this is real consciousness. You see, original spiritual consciousness has qualities, just as our polluted consciousness has qualities and characteristics and symptoms. What are the characteristics of the original pure consciousness that is actually the real you and the real me? I'll mention a few words and that should give us all a fair idea of what that spiritual consciousness or identity is all about. Love, kindness, mercy, forgiveness, humility, tolerance, equanimity, joy, selflessness, sacrifice, knowledge, sharing, and one could go on and on and on. And above all, the most important quality of this original divine consciousness is bliss. Real, uninterrupted, ever-expanding ecstasy. That spiritual ecstasy which we are all hankering for, and because we are bereft of that original spiritual consciousness, because that original spiritual consciousness is covered over by something alien, by a dark cloud of materialism, therefore we look for that ecstasy which is our original nature in the things and the people and the phenomena of this world. And it's a futile task. It is an exercise in futility. It is never to be. It is not possible. The spiritual entity cannot find ecstasy in the realm of matter. Material things, material phenomena cannot make the pure spiritual entity happy or satisfied. Inasmuch as a fish cannot be happy outside of the water, no matter what you give the fish. You may give the fish all the pleasures and comforts of this world, the latest fashionable clothes, the latest Formula One racing cars, the latest electronic gadgets, all kinds of delicious food. Whatever you may give the fish is not going to be satisfied. The fish will be satisfied only within the water. And within the water, all it needs to survive is just a few worms and a few plants, and that's it. It doesn't really need all the fashionable clothing and the whole structure of the modern civilization that makes us think that many things are necessary, even though they are not. So similarly, we don't really need all that we think we need to be happy. But because of lack of spiritual consciousness and knowledge, we strive to obtain that ecstasy in the material realm and utterly fail. It's natural because our search is unnatural. We cannot expect to find something where it doesn't exist. The books of knowledge of ancient India tell us that what we seek by our actions in this world is not the real thing, not the real substance, but the reflection. The reflection looks very much like the real thing, but it isn't. Let's say you're on the bank of a river. I don't know if you have mango trees here, but in India we have many mango trees, and mango is the king of fruits. It's really a delicious fruit, so everybody loves mangoes. So you see the reflection of the mango in the river. Now the mango tree stands on the bank of the lake or the river. It's got some mangoes that hang from the branch, but you're not able to see the tree. You look into the water and you see the mango, the reflection of the mango. And it looks so real. It looks so nice. And we reach into the water to try to obtain that mango. But unfortunately, when we grab that mango, all we get is a little water and perhaps a fish. But we don't get a mango. And we wonder what happened. What's the problem? The mango was there, I'm sure of it. And then we let the water calm down again and the ripples subside. And then we say, okay, let me aim now. It's right there. I can't be wrong. I just got my eyes tested the other day. So let me see again. Here I go, and we put it in again, and then lift up something, maybe a few weeds and a few pieces of straw that are floating in the water, but no mango. And we try again, and yet again, and again. And as hope lies eternal in the human breast, as the famous poet has said, we never give up. So sometimes, because instead of the mango, we get a little fish or we get a little this and that satisfies us for the time being. But the real thing we never get. It doesn't mean that the real thing doesn't exist. The real thing does exist. But it exists in a different place. It doesn't exist where we are looking at it. It doesn't exist in the place we are looking at. All we need to do is turn our gaze upwards. Look at the tree and there lies the mango. All I have to do is look up and pluck it and then enjoy the mango. It's only a question of turning my gaze from the water or the reflection to the real tree. Similarly, all it needs for us to enjoy that real happiness, that real ecstasy, which is our real nature, which is our real birthright, is to turn the gaze from outwards to inwards. That's where the real happiness is. And there is something, some pollutant that prevents us from that. And I'll come to that in a few moments. But before that, I'll just like to tell you the story of an interesting animal that is found in the Himalayas. It's called the Musk Deer. You know of the musk perfume. It's got a very strong fragrance. So many of the commercially available perfumes, they have some concentrate of musk because it's so fragrant. Now the musk is actually a secretion from the body of this deer. It's a special type of deer called the Musk Deer. Now when the secretion takes place and the fragrance oozes all over, this deer goes mad. It can't understand where this fragrance is coming from. It's an intoxicating, heady fragrance. And in a fit of madness, the deer runs everywhere trying to find out where this fragrance is coming from. It doesn't realize that the fragrance is coming from its own body. There is something being secreted somewhere in some part of the body that causes this fragrance. And the poor deer, oh dear, runs everywhere, all over the forest, and ultimately gets exhausted, falls down and dies. And that's precisely the story of the human beings in this world. We're looking at the reflection, sniffing at that fragrance, but it's ever so elusive. It slips out of our grasp so easily. It seems you've just about got it, but the moment you get it, it's gone again. And then we try and try. Where is it? Where is it? Where is this happiness? Maybe it's in sex. Maybe it's in liquor. Maybe it's in football. Maybe it's in money. Maybe it's in in this or that, and we try and try and try. But every time we are disappointed. It's not here. There's something there, but I didn't quite get what I wanted. Now what we need to do is look inwards at our spiritual nature. I am spirit soul. I am spiritual. And there is something that has polluted my mentality, that has contaminated my consciousness, that is preventing me from turning my gaze inwards. There is something that is almost magnetic that forces me to be attracted to the things of the world outside. It's so distracting that it prevents me from looking inwards. In the last decade, there has been much talk about WMDs. Those of you who are tuned into the political world, not that I am so much, but a little something I do know. The WMDs are the weapons of mass destruction, the atom bombs and chemical weapons and so on and so forth. But there's something else which is more deadly, and that's called the weapons of mass distraction. This whole consumerist culture is a culture of mass distraction. It just bewilders the ordinary being with such a wide array of different types of products and things. It's so dazzling. No one can take his or her eyes away from this. The sheer range of the items that are produced and the glitter and glamour of this world is so overpowering, so overwhelming, that we all become victims. We become distracted from our internal search, from that internal gaze, by the power of this distraction, mass distraction. The shopping malls, the advertising, and everything that goes with it, the modern consumerist culture that focuses on enjoyment. You are meant to enjoy this world. Nothing should come in the way of your enjoyment. Civilizations today are designed and programmed and structured to maximize uninterrupted enjoyment of its citizens. To the degree that the citizens can enjoy this uninterrupted and free worldly enjoyment, to that degree, the society or civilization is considered to be advanced according to modern thinking. But according to ancient spiritual thinking, that is not the criterion. The criterion is something different. The standard of advancement of a civilization is gauged by not how much you have, by not how much you consume, by not how much you enjoy, but by how much you can live alone, by how simply you can live, and simultaneously, to what degree you can lift your consciousness from the material realm of enjoyment to the spiritual realm of love and service. The love and service on the spiritual platform is different from the love and service on the material platform. On the material platform, love is selfish. Service is selfish. It is motivated by something that I want in return. And if I don't get what I want, then there is trouble in my relationships. Therefore, we see the deeper we enter into the material realm of consciousness and think ourselves to be the enjoyers, then everything else crumbles. But when we rise to the spiritual surface, to the platform, then we transform our minds, our mentality to the principle of service, selfless service and love on the spiritual platform, which doesn't expect anything in return, not one thing. Love for the sake of love, and that love is directed towards something beyond this world, not the things of this world. Unless one has come to that spiritual platform, one cannot truly love one's fellow beings. One cannot love human beings, one cannot love animals, one cannot love nature, and one cannot protect and take care of all these things and people. Real love comes from divine love. That divine love, of which our heart, our soul is a storehouse actually, is now lying locked. And what humanity needs to do is to unlock this secret, vast treasure that lies within ourselves. So the spiritual mentality, spiritual consciousness has these qualities that I mentioned, like love, bliss, kindness, forgiveness, and so on. In contrast, the material consciousness has certain qualities which are the exact opposites. There is greed, there's anger, there's envy, there's pride and arrogance, there is lust, there is competitiveness, there is jealousy, hatred, violence, divisiveness as opposed to unity. These are all the symptoms of the material consciousness. There is the sense of acquisitiveness. I want. This I want is the cause of the problems of the world. Because it's a question of more and more. I want more, and then more, and even more. And there's no limit to what I want. So this acquisitive spirit plagues the material mind. And that is a real pollutant. Because the moment I have an enjoying spirit, it means I'm being self-centered. In other words, whether I realize it or not, I am placing myself in the center of the universe. And I expect the universe to be an object of my enjoyment. I want to be happy in doing these things. And because everyone has the same spirit of wanting to enjoy the resources of this world, and because the resources of this world are necessarily limited, so what do you have? You have competition, envy, quarrel, wars, because we all claim proprietorship rights and enjoyership rights over the resources of something that doesn't actually belong to us. It is not our property. When we entered into this world from our mother's womb, we came with empty hands. When we leave this world, we will also leave with empty hands. Everything else here belongs to that one Supreme Lord, that one Supreme Being, who is not to be divided in terms of religious faiths, as is being wrongly done by the people of this world, causing so many problems. That one Supreme Being, we may call him by different names, is the ultimate proprietor of everything in existence. And it is He and He alone who is the supreme controller and the supreme enjoyer of everything. We, as parts and parcels of that one Supreme Being, that spiritual supreme entity, are meant to serve Him. That is our constitutional position. So the spiritual mentality is a mentality of service, of humility. The material mentality is a mentality of enjoyership and controllership. So, to the degree that we have this spirit within us, that greed, that lust, that drives us on to enjoy this world, to that degree, helplessly, we will be driven to exploit the resources of this world. And we will pollute this world as an incidental byproduct. So this is the problem. Our consciousness is like pure water. Originally, rainwater, for example, is very pure. Of course, nowadays you have the concept of acid rain. Because of all the toxic fumes in the atmosphere, even the rain that actually, even before it touches the ground, it's become polluted because of all the acid and all the other toxins in the air. But assuming that the toxins are not there in the atmosphere, the rainwater is actually very pure. And it becomes impure when it touches the ground or comes in contact with some other pollutants or toxins. Then that water acquires that quality of that new substance, that alien substance. So when therefore you see, some of our ancient books of knowledge have talked about different types of water, for example, just to make an incidental mention. There are different types of water and each have their own quality. Water in a well, water in a standing lake, water in a river, water from the sea, water from a spring that comes from underground, water from a waterfall, rainwater, each has its own unique characteristics. In some of the Ayurvedic books, these characteristics are delineated. And by the way, I will just mention that the purest form of water is considered to be water from a river in which the water is flowing and dashes against the rocks and bends. Such water is considered the purest, which comes down flowing from the hills and moves on. So in any case, water is very pure. But when it comes in contact with certain substances, like acid or mud or whatever, it becomes polluted. Similarly, our consciousness, our spiritual mind is very pure originally, constitutionally. But when it comes in contact with matter, with the material mentality, then it acquires the qualities of this matter. It acquires the lower nature of matter. And we forget our own original higher nature. And then we start thinking of ourselves as being material entities when actually we are spiritual entities. And our consciousness is very sensitive. It's very easily affected by changes in the environment and substances that may be introduced into it. There was a researcher in Japan not so many years ago. I forget his name now. He performed some very interesting experiments with water. And what he did was that he took different samples of water, he froze them, and then had the crystals of the water and subjected these crystals, or the water itself actually first, to different stimuli, to different environments. And like, for example, in one experiment, he had one jar of water into which he constantly spoke, "I like you very much, you are very nice," and things like that. And he also had these stickers put up all over saying, "You are very nice." And the other one, he had words like, "You make me sick, you are terrible, I hate you." So he had these, and he was constantly telling this other body of water, "You are this and you are that." And then the other one, he was giving a lot of positive strokes. And then he froze the water, the two jars of water, and analyze the crystals. And he's published it. It's up on the internet. I wish I remembered his name. But if you do some Google search, I'm sure nowadays Google is G for Google, G for God. You'll get everything.
Japanese.
Sorry?
It's a Japanese guy.
Yeah, Japanese person, yes. Akia, something like that. I'm sorry, I'm not so good with the names, yeah. So, and he's given photographs of the crystals. The water that was spoken harshly and rudely to, those crystals were malformed and didn't have any aesthetic beauty about them. But the crystals of the water, which were spoken to very lovingly and very kindly and very positively, they were aesthetic beauties. They were so symmetrical and so nice. They were like works of art. And then he also subjected these different bodies of water to different types of music. To some batches of water, he made the water hear classical music, very soft, gentle, melodious music of different types. In some cases, he subjected them to choir singing, religious singing in songs. And then to some other batches of water, he subjected them to metal music, acid rock music, and those types of music, which make a lot of harsh sounds, which may not be sometimes melodious, with a lot of screaming, shouting, screeching. And then he examined the crystals from those batches of water. Again, very intriguing. And it's all there. You can see those photographs of these crystals. A similar thing. Those batches of water that were subjected to very soothing music, melodious music, their crystals, they came out to be really beautiful. And the crystals of the water that was subjected to all this acid music and metal music or whatever other kinds of music were there, they again turned out to be without any specific shape or form, and they were malformed, and they looked kind of dull and sad. But these crystals looked bright and happy. And he did so much study like this on the water to indicate that basically everything is very sensitive to the environment. To what you subject a substance to, that substance amends its original nature to conform to that the property it has acquired from that alien element. So also with our original consciousness. So long have we been in contact with this world and the worldly way of thinking, namely, I am the enjoyer, I am the center of the world, I want to be the enjoyer, the controller. So that has rubbed off so much on us that has become our second nature. But it's not our first nature. Our first nature is spiritual. This exploitative mentality that has arisen from the conception that I am the enjoyer and I am the controller and I want to enjoy my life like this is what is a primary pollutant in our consciousness. If we can transform this enjoying spirit into the serving spirit, then everything will be achieved. But then the question arises, where should that serving spirit be directed? There are many, many people in this world who understand this principle of service being superior to enjoyment. But because of lack of a higher spiritual understanding, they channelize their serving propensity to the things and objects and people and phenomena of this world, which is much better than grossly trying to exploit and enjoy the resources of nature. But nevertheless, it still is not a solution, because we are still trapped within this mentality. So then we have to direct that serving spirit to that one supreme spiritual entity. We have a relationship of service to that one supreme entity, who is the one and only enjoyer. Sometimes it pricks our ego, and we may think, why does he have to be the enjoyer? Why does he alone have to be the enjoyer? Why not me? It is precisely this attitude that is at the heart of the materialistic mentality. But when we understand that we are parts and parcels spiritually and in every way of that one supreme being, and we divert our serving propensity to that one supreme Lord, then automatically we become blissful. We offer ourselves for the pleasure of that one supreme Lord in service. And in that service lies a higher pleasure, a higher enjoyment than even by receiving that service. Actually, in one sense, the devoted soul that serves this one supreme entity selflessly, only for the sake of pleasing that Lord, experiences a greater happiness than even that supreme entity. This is a mystery of the spiritual realm. Because it is in serving that we get more pleasure than in being served. Sometime about 50 or 60 years ago, there was a Prime Minister of England who one time was in his office and he had a visitor. And the visitor was asked to wait. The visitor knew him quite well, but still he was asked to wait. And he was waiting, and the Prime Minister was taking his own time in his office. Finally, the visitor barged into the office because he didn't want to wait any longer. And what did he see inside? He was expecting that the Prime Minister would probably be talking on a dozen phones and doing so many things and signing papers or whatever. But he wasn't doing that. He was on his hands and knees, and his little grandson had straddled him on his back and was riding him piggyback. Giddy up, giddy up, giddy up. And the Prime Minister of England was enjoying himself thoroughly. It was said that at that time the sun never shone or sun never set on the British Empire. Nowadays when I go to England, I see the sun never rises in the British Empire. It's always dark and gloomy. There's never any sunlight hardly. It's always so cloudy and rains. In any case, that was something they said in those days. So he was such a powerful man in those days, 60 or 70 years ago. He had practically half the world at his command. He had thousands and thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people under him. But he took more pleasure in serving somebody who was actually quite helpless, who was dependent on him. And he was more happy serving this little child than in experiencing the egoistic happiness of that high position and being a lord. This is just to illustrate that the serving spirit is not something demeaning. The serving spirit does not make us lower than what we are. It is not something that is humiliating. Rather, it is something that is truly uplifting, truly purifying. And this is the cause of that ultimate bliss that we are forever seeking, but unfortunately unable to find in this material world. So if this enjoying spirit, this exploitative spirit, this self-centered spirit is taken care of, is washed away by the gradual process of learning to serve that one Supreme Lord, that one Supreme Entity, then we will be effectively removing that pollutant, purifying our consciousness and bringing it back to the original state of the consciousness, which is actually a state of love and bliss. Love and bliss are actually one and the same thing on the spiritual platform. There is no difference. Love of God is bliss, and nothing else is bliss than that. And we see this in the mystics of all religious traditions. Saints, many saints across the world in history, cutting across the religious divide, which is in any case an artificial creation. We will see they went into rapturous ecstasy. They gave up all the pleasures of this world, not for nothing. We are basically seekers of happiness, so they didn't give it up for nothing. They did experience something so significantly higher and better that they considered the pleasures of this world to be insignificant. That was their calling. That was their spontaneous outpouring. And that is reflected in many, many of the scriptures of the world. Unfortunately, this mystic devotional element has not been emphasized in the different religions of the world so much as it needs to be. Rather, it is the more ritualistic aspect that has been emphasized, the organizational aspect that has been emphasized. And therefore, the real essence of all these spiritual processes, which are fundamentally one, are not kept in focus. So if we revive that focus, then yes, we will be dealing with that pollution within, purifying our hearts of all the contamination that has been there from time immemorial. Once this world is populated by people with pure hearts, then the world will be a place that is so spiritual, free of all kinds of pollution. Because now the people of this world will not be driven by enjoyment and greed and lust and anger and envy, but they will be driven by the spirit to serve. In a spirit of humility, they would like to serve everyone else and make them happy. Imagine a competition when everyone serves and competes to make everyone else happy, as opposed to a civilization where everyone competes to make oneself happy. This is the difference in the two platforms of thinking. So how does one do that? How does one reconnect with one's source? How does one come back to one's original spiritual position as being lovers of God? The beginning is to associate with those who love God, or at least those who are sincerely trying to love God, following some authentic, authorized process. It doesn't matter what particular external form or denomination it is called. And principally, our ancient books say that in this age, which is called the age of quarrel, where we quarrel for no good reason at all, the way to reconnect ourselves to that original spiritual essence is the chanting of the names of God. This chanting process is the one that filters our mind, filters our consciousness, purifies it. Inasmuch as a water purifier can purify water from all its contaminants. So all this lust and greed and pride and envy and hatred and so on and so forth will get cleansed by the process of chanting the names of God. And you had a demonstration of that a little earlier, where there was so much nice melodious chanting of the holy names. Just by following this process and also cultivating knowledge from the ancient books, about how we should live, about certain philosophical elements of this spirituality, gradually we will see ourselves in a different light. We will see the world in a different light. We will feel ourselves so light and happy. You will see yourself practically floating, not walking on the ground. This is what real spiritual life is all about. We call it Krishna consciousness. To be conscious of Krishna, that one supreme, all-attractive, supremely lovable and loving entity. Some people call him God. We prefer to call him Krishna. Because God connotes or denotes majesty, awe, reverence, power, and such things. But Krishna denotes just one thing, love. And another thing, happiness. All we need to do is to reconnect with that Krishna. And that's called Krishna consciousness. So this consciousness of Krishna is our original consciousness, the original pure state of our heart, a state free of all internal pollution. And then automatically those who are Krishna conscious, or even if they're God conscious in any other tradition in a genuine way, then the world will become such a wonderful place for us to live in. Thank you very much for your very kind and patient hearing.
Hare Krishna devotees. Krishna, sorry. It was very nice, wonderful class on how to cleanse the internal pollution that we have accumulated since many lifetimes. I will mention in 2 minutes, like very important sentences that I noted down. Whatever like we see the pollution outside, it is because of the pollution inside, and that is because of pollution of the or polluting of our consciousness. So then Maharaj talked about like how to clean that pollution, and then Maharaj talked about also what is the original nature of our consciousness. So which is the spiritual, godly, and the qualities of original consciousness. Maharaj talked about like love, kindness, tolerance, sacrifice, knowledge, sharing, selflessness, bliss, forgiveness, and many other things. And as opposite, Maharaj mentioned about material qualities like greed, lust, envy, violence, divisiveness, competitiveness, and like that many. And why this competitiveness and these things are coming? Maharaj mentioned that like that is because of pollution of the consciousness. What is that? I want to enjoy. So that's why our we are like, so that means like we are self-centered. Then we think that all universe should serve me, and then everybody thinks that. So that's where, because of the limited resources of this material world, so this competitiveness, quarrel, envy, all these things come into. And Maharaj nicely reminded us that when we entered this world from the mother's womb, we came with empty hand, and when we leave this world, it is we go with the empty hand. So it is in between like what we do. And Maharaj also nicely gave the example, I mean many examples or analogies like musk deer, like which has the good fragrance, and when it secretes, so a lot of fragrance comes, it is within, but it tries to find out, then it gets exhausted and then dies. So similarly, we are also thinking that like material things gives happiness, then we are running around, then get exhausted, then like at the end die. And Maharaj also give the nice analogy of as the pure water gets the qualities of pollutants, so uh, similarly when we enter this world, like we, our consciousness also gets contaminated. because of this material world. And Maharaj also mentioned, give the example of like water experiment. The water that got um, the water that was exposed to the good music or good words, so it was nicely formed crystals, whereas other one is like no, malforming of the crystals. And our first nature is spiritual, and the primary pollutant of our consciousness is I want to enjoy, which is the secondary nature, but it's not the primary. So, and when we transform our enjoyment into serving mentality, and that serving mentality, that we should direct towards the supreme, and we, which we call Krishna. And serving gives more pleasure than getting served. And how to get the consciousness of service or consciousness of loving? Maharaj mentioned it is by associating with those who have love and we have serving attitude to Krishna, or and those who are strictly following the path of love. And by the process, and Maharaj at the end mentioned how to cleanse this contaminated consciousness. It is by the process of chanting of Supreme Lord, and that purifies the heart, and also it filters the pollutants. And at the end, Maharaj gave a conclusion that Krishna consciousness is our original consciousness.